Wait a minute, a hardtail? Who even rides one of those? Dude, are you even a real mountain biker? Come on! Just get a full suspension already. Well, throw away that shock pump and unleash the haters, because today, we're going through the build of my favorite little hardtail, the Chromag Stylus. I posted a tech climb session where I was collabing with Steve from a channel called Hardtail Party. I first met Steve a few years ago in Arizona and actually brought my hardtail to Sedona specifically to ride with Steve. And now, he's hardtail famous, and I should probably try to do the same, I guess. After posting our climb videos, I got quite a few questions from all of you to do a bike check on the hardtail. I realized it's been almost a full year since I last went over that bike, so here we go, a very different sort of bike check. Rather than stand in front of a camera and ramble on about what color chainring bolts I bought, I want to try essentially a podcast format overdubbed with some of my favorite hardtail riding footage. If you like it, hit the like button. If you don't like it, hit the subscribe button. And if you really don't like it, then you can confuse me by sending mixed signals and becoming a patron. I do have the full spec of this bike listed in the description below as well, and I have links for all those items over to Jensen USA. After hitting those links, anything you buy from Jensen will help support my channel, so big thanks for that. Also, several of the companies who produce the parts on this build either sponsor me or have been kind enough to give me product or even offered up discounted product for my own use. Big thanks to PNW Components, Industry 9, and Shimano for their sponsorship.
This is very different than Galbraith.
And I want to give a special shout out to Chromag, who gave me a really good deal on this frame right here. Furthermore, I used to be sponsored by Trust, but unfortunately, they are no longer in business, so I don't even know if I need to explain that anymore. That said, I hope they come back. I think that fork had some future. If I were to buy my own components and bike, I'd generally purchase the same setup, as the retail prices for everything on this bike are quite reasonable given the market for high-end mountain bike components. At this point in time, availability will be far more of an issue than price, anyhow.
Windy.
So first up, the frame is a Chromag Stylus, which is a steel 27.5 hardtail. I'm super tall, towering around 5'8", or 174 centimeters. After turning down that lucrative MBA contract, I realized that the medium size of the Stylus would be great for the trials type riding I was expecting to do at first on this bike. I still have no regrets on going for the size medium rather than the medium/large, and we'll talk more about the frame size later.
Oh, there's a bridge there. Sketchy.
As many of you remember, I had a Trust message fork on this bike at first, and I really liked that fork for dry conditions riding. I also really like the way it looks, especially on this bike. While an aggressive steel hardtail is already somewhat polarizing, once you add a carbon fiber linkage fork to it, folks definitely know that you're someone with some opinions, shall we say. Anyhow, I wish I still had that Trust fork with me on the recent Sedona trip.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't have time to reinstall it.
Yeah. Kind of like what we were doing earlier.
At the tail end of last summer, as we started to get into those wet conditions we often have here at home in Washington State, I did prefer the Marzocchi Z1 fork. That fork's 170 millimeters travel with a short offset of 36 millimeters. Riding-wise, it offers more small bump sensitivity than the Trust, which is great for the greasy roots and slimy dirt of Washington.
Oh!
But that's not why I really use that Z1. It's simply because it's compatible with a fender. The Trust never really got along with a fender as well as I'd like. Recently, I've discovered the RRP bolt-on fender. I bought a couple of these from their Canadian distributor and generally like the product. With how wet it gets here, a full coverage is great. Being able to install and remove it with two simple bolts saves those zip tie trees for future generations of budding MacGyvers. With the Z1, I do have to run noticeably more compression damping for the Stylus than I did on the HD5. This is to keep the handlebars at a more consistent height, something that was very noticeable when coming from the Trust. The Trust fork doesn't have much downwards travel. Instead, the front wheel travels backwards towards the rear wheel. The unique feel of that axle path, combined with the short wheelbase of the frame, made for a super fun and unique ride. It was very nimble, and I could kind of put the bike anywhere on the trail, opening all kinds of funky lines up. The handlebars never dropped so low, so the feel was nicely consistent, at least in the dry. In the wet, I have a hard time getting enough traction to get the Trust fork to actually compress, but that's a whole different story for a whole different video. I don't want to foreshadow too much, but I do have yet another new fork here that I'm planning on throwing on the Stylus soon, so stay tuned, as rest assured, there will indeed be a video all about it. I'm running a full P&W Components cockpit with the range K-Dub handlebar cut to 760 millimeters, an older range stem in that Goldilocks 45 mil length, loam grips, a loam lever dropper remote, and a 200 mil drop loam dropper post. Yes, P&W sponsors me, and they've been a big supporter of my channel for a while now. I'm quite proud to be working with them as Aaron, Emily, Riley, and the whole crew make great stuff. Next up, the wheels, an important part of any bike. I'm using my sponsor Industry 9's wheel system with Industry 9 30mm wide aluminum rims, aluminum spokes, and Hydra hubs. I'm running standard Cushcore inserts both front and rear. And yes, this is actually my only bike with tire inserts. Steve, yep, hardtail party Steve, mentioned he liked the inserts on the hardtail, and I agree. They've been great. Cushcore did some testing with the Motion Instruments data acquisition system and is claiming a 12% increase in compliance once you've added the Cushcore to a bike. On the hardtail, I'd agree that this is definitely a benefit to the overall bike. I'm riding a WTB Trailboss 2.6 Tough Fast Rolling rear tire with a 2.8 Vigilante Tough high grip up front.
Oh, cool.
The 2.8 is a tad undersized for a 2.8, and in real life is about the same size as that 2.6 I originally had.
Looks like that was some kind of a cool drop-in line.
I like this tire quite a bit at home in Bellingham, but this 2.8 Vigilante front tire really stands out in the rocks of Sedona. You're able to get not only more traction, but when you're bumping into stuff, you get knocked far less off course. For tire pressure, I'm generally running about 18 PSI in front and about 20 PSI in rear, and yes, that's pretty high for using tire inserts and tough casing tires with such a high volume tire, but it works for me. I'm running a full Shimano XT 12-speed drivetrain with 165mm cranks, the stock 10-51 cassette, and 4-piston brakes with 180mm rotors front and rear. I was running 180mm rotors on all my wheels, but recently I tried some 203 rotors, and they do have a tad more modulation than the 180s. If I have enough rotors on hand, I might try the 203 rotors on the hardtail this summer. As for pedals, I've ridden Shimano Saint, Shimano XT, Chromag Daga, and Chromag Scarab pedals on the bike. These are all flat pedals, as I'm basically retired from clipless. My overall favorite pedal has been the Scarabs, with the Saints coming in second. All those pedals have honestly worked great though, and I'm happy with all of them. I did swap the Chromag saddle out for a WTB Pure saddle, as this saddle fits me really well, and it's a little easier for me to work around when sitting on the bike in different angles.
Here's a cool line on the right.
The steep seat tube of the Chromag works great with a wider saddle, as when you're more upright, your pelvis is rocked back and is resting on the saddle on the wider portion of the sit bones. For a water bottle cage, I've been rocking a Lezyne power cage and occasionally the Arundel carbon side loader, but I'm going to swap those out, and I have some of these foundation water bottle cages from Jensen, which should be easier to get the bottle in and out. As far as I can remember, that's all the parts on the bike. I'm going to throw a Cane Creek 110 headset on there pretty soon, just because I have one on hand, and why not? This bike is cool. It's not necessarily fast, but it's super fun. The short wheelbase with slack angles makes for a lot of weird lines that a full suspension enduro bike would simply never consider. Oh yeah, bumps. So with the Cushcore and the 2.6 rear tire, it's not terribly uncomfortable through the rough. The slack head angle and short stem help a ton with that. Add in the 2.8 and 2.6 tire combo, and while it's not as cushy as a 6-inch travel enduro bike, it's more than manageable. The bike's Achilles heel would definitely be fast trails. With that short wheelbase and being a hardtail, it doesn't love high speeds, which is fine by me. I have a bunch of other bikes that do love going mock chicken. And yes, those other bikes are full suspension.
Wow.
But that's okay. The Chromag's got such a different feel that it makes trails I'm kind of bored of feel completely new again. Would I want this to be my only bike? I mean, I could live with it if I had to, and I'd still be quite content.
High performance.
But luckily, that's not my situation. This bike is a wonderful complement to my quiver of enduro bikes. If it were my only bike, I'd probably want to go for the medium-large wheelbase, maybe slightly smaller tires, possibly even no Cushcore, just to make it a little bit lighter. The bike is quite heavy. I haven't weighed it in a while, but it was over 35 pounds at one point. So yeah, it's a hefty girl. Not necessarily fast. Well, once again, it's definitely fun. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider checking out my full series of riding tutorials, which I post only to my Patreon page. As always, please do subscribe and let me know in the comments, do you have a modern aggressive hardtail as well? How do you like it? let me know. I'd love to hear from you. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Corner. Uh-oh, is my back tire flat? I seriously never gotten a flat with these morning ride vlogs. I think I've had 1, 2 flat tires in the last 2 or 3 years. Hasn't been something I've had to deal a lot with.